The abandoned asylum where cameras stopped working. The screen went black in the middle of a whisper. For a second, the night vision camera showed the long empty ward in sickly green, rows of rusted beds, a cracked clock stopped at 3, and the thick hallway that led to the west wing. Dust motes floated like tiny planets in the beam. Then the picture warbled. Lines crawled across the frame like little white worms. The audio turned into a high, thin hiss. And with no warning at all, the camera blinked out as if somebody had closed their hand around it. "Camera 1's dead," Marco said, his voice small in the silence. He checked the battery pack. It was warm in his hand, but the meter read 0. He slapped it and tried another pack. Nothing. "What the?" He did not finish. The second camera, held by Jess, squealed and then went gray. The drone above them faltered, its lights dimming until it drifted and thumped into a hanging light fixture. Phones, flashlights, even the digital watch on Sam's wrist stuttered and froze for a beat. For the first time in their lives, the crew felt like they had walked into a place that did not like being watched. Someone laughed, a short, frightened sound that tried to be brave. Then all the watches restarted like nothing had happened, the drone blinked back to life, and for a breath they thought it was over. The monitors found a signal. The green night vision returned. But the ward looked wrong. The beds were closer. The shadows moved in the camera like draped cloth catching the wind. On one monitor, a smear of something dark slid across the lens and stopped, as if it had a shape but no body. It rested on the glass for a long second. Jess shouted and reached forward, but the feed went black again before her hand could touch the monitor. The feed stayed black. Beyond the glass of the camera display, the crew could hear one another breathing. They could hear the old building settle, pipes popping like distant bones. They could hear the wet drip of water someplace unseen. They could not hear their own courage. "Pack up," Sam said at last, but his words did not have the power to move anyone. They all sat very still in the old nurse's office, surrounded by maps, battery chargers, and steaming thermoses. The room smelled like old paper and cold iron. None of them wanted to be the first to leave the light. This is how the story starts, not with a scream, not with a crash, but with technology refusing to tell the truth. The asylum had been closed for decades. Kids in town dared each other to touch the rusted fence. Late-night explorers posted shaky footage of peeling wallpaper and funny noises on social media. Someone had started a rumor that cameras died there, that footage corrupted, that batteries drained in minutes. The rumor grew like mildew. Journalists called it spooky. Engineers called it electromagnetic interference. Paranormal people called it proof. Nobody could agree what to call it, but everyone agreed, something strange happened inside the walls. Before that night, Sam had been a fan of facts. He made documentary shorts, loved maps and meters and testable things. Jess was an urban explorer with a steady hand and a camera feed that had never failed her. Marco fixed drones for a living and smiled like sunshine. Mia wrote for the local paper and liked cold coffee and warmer stories. They had come together because the asylum was a problem people wanted to solve. They planned with care. They checked batteries. They tested radios on the parking lot. They walked the perimeter in daylight and counted windows. They joked outside the locked gates about the best way to avoid ghosts, avoid the place before dark. But when they found an unlocked side door, the joke stopped being a joke. Inside, the building kept secrets. The wards had names like Hope and Mercy, painted long ago in blue that had once meant comfort. Now the paint peeled in long ribbons like old skin. The tile floor was cold and slick in places. Old operatory carts sat like tiny islands of metal in dim rooms. The more they moved, the more things seemed to watch from corners, shapes where plaster had crumbled into faces. On the first sweep, cameras recorded perfectly. They captured the sound of shoes on tile, the nervous laugh when a curtain moved but there was no wind. They recorded the crew checking the old nurse's station and finding a stack of patient intake forms, names typed with dates from decades past. The crew read a few names aloud, trying to imagine the lives behind them. Some pages were stained by time, Some had pencil notes in the margins that made Mia's skin prickle. "Why are there so many names crossed out?" she asked, fingers tracing a line. "No idea," Jess said. "Maybe records transfers? Old paperwork does weird things." They set up their base in the nurse's office and streamed for the channel that wanted truth. People tuned in late night with popcorn and dares. Viewers left comments that flashed across the screen. "Don't go in there!" and "Batteries die?" Oh! It made them laugh. They wanted proof, not panic. The first glitches were small. A camera would snow for a second, then clear. A clip of audio would skip like a scratched vinyl record. Sam marked the times, wrote down the meter readings, and shrugged. Old buildings eat electronics. He knew that. He had measured power drops in more than one old theater and museum. The old wiring could make strange fields. Moisture and cold could make batteries fail. But then people started to talk about patterns. The glitches weren't random. They happened near certain places: the West Wing, the locked solarium, the room with the big clock. A viewer in the chat said they saw a black smear on the lens in one feed and that, seconds later, a nearby light died. Another viewer pointed at frames where the timestamp on the video stopped for 11 seconds, then jumped ahead as if someone had spent that time looking at them, and they had missed it. The crew grew quieter. At 2 a.m, Marco walked the narrow hall to check a battery bank. The flashlight trembled in his hand. He called out, "All good," though his voice was not steady. He felt something press against his shoulder like cold cloth, but there was nothing there. He felt watched in a way that didn't belong to the camera. When he turned back, Jess's monitor flashed and then died. They were alone. Outside, a goose called from the marsh, and the sound seemed absurdly loud. Marco set the batteries down and checked them again. They were at full charge. Yet when he touched them to the camera, the indicator said empty. The crew looked at each other as if crossing into the dark together meant never turning back. In the nurse's office, the chat on their live stream demanded answers. "Show the solarium!" someone typed. "Is someone there? Turn on the lights!" Another comment read, "My battery died last time I entered. You should leave." Sam leaned forward and whispered, "We're not leaving. Not tonight. Not when we came this far." He fought to be brave for them all. But the building had its own rules. The cameras had already shown them the rule: here, the watchers can choose to be unrecorded. The cameras failed first, and then, like a steady hand closing a book page by page, the lights began to dim. A soft, wet sound came from the hallway, like footsteps in a shallow puddle. It came closer. The crew could not see anything in the doorway, only the black throat of the hall. The drone's light swept and found nothing. The mist on the monitors thickened, moving as if in response to a breath. Then the chat went silent for a beat. The stream stuttered. On the main monitor, as if the camera had finally understood it could not catch everything, a pale letter slowly wrote itself across the screen in fogged breath. It was not letters like people write. It looked like someone had traced fingers across the glass from the inside. It read one word: leave. The chapter ends with the live chat exploding into panicked messages as the monitors flicker and go out, one by one, until nothing remains but the trembling sound of breath and the far-off drip of water in the asylum's deep, listening heart. The hallway was so silent that Ethan could hear his own heartbeat tapping against his ears. The old asylum doors behind him had slammed shut on their own just moments before, as if the building itself wanted to trap him inside. His flashlight flickered weakly, its battery dropping from 80% to 12% in under a minute. Every piece of equipment he carried, camera, mic, even his phone, had gone completely dead the moment he crossed into the East Wing. This was the moment every investigator talked about. The moment they warned each other about in online forums. The place where cameras stopped working. And now he was standing in it, alone. As Ethan eased backward, the air grew colder. His breath puffed in small ghosts of fog. Somewhere deeper inside the hallway, he heard a soft click, like the sound of a camera shutter, even though all his gear was powered off. Another click. Then another. Slow, steady, patient. He held his breath as the clicking moved closer, one soft step at a time. With a shaky hand, he lifted his flashlight. The beam barely reached the peeling walls, but he saw something, a shadow standing halfway down the hall. Not moving. Not walking. Just appearing. The clicking continued, but now it sounded like it was right behind him. Ethan spun around. No one was there. The hallway behind him was empty, but a strong static hum pushed through the air like invisible pressure. The static built and built until it buzzed through his teeth. His flashlight sputtered and died completely, plunging the hall into thick darkness. Ethan's breath hitched. Then, something touched his shoulder. He jumped and yelled, stumbling away, until dim light suddenly returned, and the darkness peeled back just long enough for him to see the figure standing inches from him. Not a ghost. Not a person. Just a tall, faceless mass of shadow shaped almost like a human silhouette, flickering as if made of TV static. And then everything went black again. The story snapped back, rewinding, pulling the reader to where it all began. 3 days earlier, Ethan, his cousin Maya, and their friend Jordan had arrived in the small town of Ashford Hill, a place surrounded by pine trees thick enough to feel like walls. The town was quiet, with old brick buildings, dusty windows, and a gas station that still used flip-up numbers on its sign. They came to film a simple urban exploration video for Ethan's YouTube channel. Nothing dangerous, nothing too wild, just a walkthrough of the abandoned Hillridge Asylum. Ethan had researched dozens of abandoned hospitals before, but Hillridge was different. Every article said the same thing: cameras refused to work inside, no matter the brand or battery level. Some said the problem was electromagnetic interference from the old wiring. Some said moisture was the real enemy. Others swore it was something else. Maya joked that Ethan's camera would probably just melt from embarrassment at how old the building was. Jordan laughed and said ghosts hated being filmed. Ethan laughed too, but part of him wondered. He'd watched enough corrupted footage online from this place to know that something was strange here, stranger than any other abandoned site he'd explored. Their first day in town felt normal. They checked into a small motel, ate pizza from a quiet corner shop, and planned out their filming route. The plan was simple: enter the asylum at noon while sunlight still poured in, capture some safe footage, then leave before sunset. But the moment they stepped through the asylum's rusted front doors the next day, everything changed. The air dropped to refrigerator cold. Their breath fogged in front of them. The walls hummed faintly, like someone had pressed a giant speaker against the concrete. Jordan lifted his camera. Dead. Maya lifted hers. Dead. Ethan tried his phone. Dead. All three stared at the blank screens, confused. "That's weird," Jordan whispered. Ethan forced a laugh. "Old wiring, right? Or maybe the walls are just too thick." But the look Maya gave him said she didn't buy it. She hugged her jacket tighter and stepped closer to him. They moved through the entrance hall, stepping over old clipboards and stacks of broken metal frames. Every room felt colder than the last. Their flashlights flickered, buzzed, then dimmed again. In one room, water dripped loudly into a rusty bucket, echoing down the hallway like distant footsteps. The building felt alive. And they weren't alone. At one point, Jordan swore he saw a figure move across the hall at the end of the corridor. Maya said she heard someone whisper her name, even though Ethan and Jordan hadn't said a word. By the time they reached the east wing, Ethan was sweating despite the cold. He raised his camera again, hoping maybe, just maybe, it would work now. Nothing. All three devices were completely drained. He sighed. "Okay, that's officially creepy." Jordan nodded. "Guys, should we head out?" Ethan almost agreed, but then something caught his eye. A single door at the end of the hall was open just a crack. A faint glow pulsed behind it. Not bright. Just soft enough to feel like something, or someone, was waiting. "Did you guys see that?" Ethan whispered. They stepped closer, drawn by curiosity. Each step felt like walking into deeper silence. But before they reached the door, a loud slam echoed from behind them, like the entrance doors had shut by themselves. Jordan cursed and spun around. That wasn't the wind, Maya whispered. Ethan swallowed. Okay, everybody stay calm. We'll just. He didn't finish. Because the light behind the cracked door suddenly turned off. And from inside the darkness, they heard a single clicking sound, like a camera shutter being pressed. Once. Twice. Now 3 times. Jordan whispered. Ethan, something's in that room. The lights flickered. The hallway dimmed. And just before everything went black, Ethan saw a tall shadow move through the doorway, gliding toward them in absolute silence. The hallway felt colder than before, so cold that Emma could see her breath drift in front of her camera even though the building had no electricity. She pressed the record button again, but the screen stayed black. The same thing happened to Jake and Melissa. 3 cameras. 3 dead screens. Behind them, a soft buzzing sound rose from the old psychiatric wing, like a swarm of insects trapped behind concrete walls. None of them wanted to move, but the sound slowly grew, pulling them deeper into the abandoned asylum. Emma swallowed hard and stepped forward. As they turned the corner, the buzzing stopped. Every camera flickered on at once. But instead of showing the hallway in front of them, each screen displayed the same impossible image, the 3 of them standing in the room, except a 4th figure stood behind them. A tall, blurry shape, like a person made of static. Emma spun around, but nothing was there. The screens flickered again, then died completely as if someone had pulled the plug on reality itself. A low hum rolled across the floor, rattling old wheelchairs and metal trays. The lights, long broken, flashed for the first time in decades, glowing a deep, unnatural red. Jake grabbed Emma's arm. We need to go. Now. They ran back toward the entrance, but every hallway looked different, twisting into new shapes like the building itself was shifting. Doors appeared where there hadn't been doors. Windows vanished. The asylum felt alive. Finally, they burst through a side exit into the cold night air. Outside, every camera suddenly powered back on. The last frame recorded on each one showed the same thing. The 3 of them running. And the static figure slowly stepping out of the doorway behind them. Emma didn't look back. She didn't have to. She knew the cameras had finally caught something they were never meant to see.